Hi, I'm Pastor Brenda, and it is really nice to meet you in this space. I'm going to say once again, I say this a lot in our church, you have been given the God-given authority to lead your brain, to not follow those rabbit trails your brain goes on and believe those thoughts are real. Let me just begin with a scripture verse that gives us this God-given authority. That's 2 Corinthians 10:5, which teaches us, this is the New Living Translation, we destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture their rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Christ. Or as the NIV more popularly says, we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. If we didn't have this God-given authority, the Bible wouldn't be instructing us to take captive our every thought. This is our God-given authority. So you have been given this authority over your brain. You do not need to follow your brain and believe what it is regurgitating is real. When you recognize your authority, then you can actually lead your brain. We're going to talk about that regurgitation tonight. So think about this. Then there is this big, beautiful truth. Our brains are wired for change. This is actually called neuroplasticity, and there's a whole science around this. Any repeated brain activity rewires us, and once rewired, our mental and physical experience of the world can be changed. Our lives can change. This change can be for good or for bad. It can lead to addiction or recovery. It can make us quick to anger or spill over with gratitude. We can become more empathetic or more susceptible to temptation. The changes can make us more or less like Christ. But this is the big deal. God has made our brains able to change. Now over on our YouTube channel, we got more in this teaching series, more about these foundational thoughts that build us up to tonight, which is this way of Jesus, the way of Jesus we believe in this church, and what our brains should be regurgitating. Because our brains do regurgitate what we feed it. And amazingly, this way of Jesus brings about the most healing, whole body experience that we need. So the science behind the work called emotional agility found, quote, traditional self-help tends to see change in terms of lofty goals and total transformation. But research actually supports the opposite view. The small, deliberate tweaks infused with your values can make a huge difference in your life. This is especially true when we tweak the routine and habitual parts of life, which through daily repetition then afford tremendous leverage for change. And that's from the book Emotional Agility, page 13. So, you know, these self-help books and these self-help podcasts, they're full of all kinds of bravado to change your life. Or maybe you had some New Year's resolutions that are just full of, this is the year, this is the bravado, I'm going to make this change in your life. Well, this bravado of willpower actually leads to self-hating terms such as, I will do better, I will muscle through, I will wake up earlier, I will minimize. These become self-hating terms because your mind is fighting against itself. It is looking for that immediate pleasure, specifically that neuropathway that has already been created in your brain. And willpower, especially this bravado type, just doesn't work that way. We can't simply power over our neuropathways. This is why New Year's resolutions tend to fail. And self-control isn't about feeling miserable as you are powering over. And nor should self-control lead to self-hate. Growth happens in those small, deliberate tweaks infused with your values. So for me, I choose long-term contemplation about God and the things of God so that my brain can permanently change. This is also practicing daily those little virtues: kindness, gentleness, thoughtful concern for others, humility, simplicity, hospitality, gratitude, patience, generosity, honesty, cheerful optimism. Now, I got that list of little virtues and that title, little virtues, from a type of teaching in the Catholic Church called Celestian spirituality. And it is a brilliant, simple teaching that when we practice these little virtues every day, then our lives are ready to practice those big virtues such as bravery. That without doing these little virtues, we can't have those big moments of our faith, right? This is also practicing ordinary time. And ordinary time is part of the liturgical calendar. From Pentecost to Advent, the liturgical calendar or the church calendar changes to ordinary time. And this is when the story of Jesus is told through our lives. Advent through Pentecost, that's the story of Jesus. And now the story of Jesus affects our lives in a way that we live this story out in ordinary time with these little virtues, making these small deliberate tweaks every day to our thinking, taking captive our thoughts so that our brain's neuropathways actually change. So this is why the way of Jesus gets soaked into my brain. I actually can make better decisions. And this syncs up exactly with what the Bible teaches about meditating on the Word, meditating on this Bible, this living and active book. So Psalm 143:5 says, "I remember the days of old. I ponder all of your great works and I think about what you have done." Psalm 119:148, "I stay awake through the night thinking about your promise." Leading your brain. Psalm 16:7-8, "I will bless the Lord who guides me. Even at night my heart instructs me. I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me." In Philippians 4:8, "And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true, honorable, right, and pure, and lovely, and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise." These are the small, deliberate tweaks that can actually change your brain and actually change your life. Now, some more science. We have these good emotions, specifically pride or vanity. This is not hubris. And we have compassion and gratitude that can help lead our brains. So when you're experiencing these emotions, self-control is less of a battle because these emotions work not by squashing our desires for pleasure in the moment, but by increasing how much more we value the future. Okay, so these good emotions, again, are pride, not hubris, compassion, and gratitude. Now, there's a lot of science to back this up. Decades and decades of this science. So these good emotions help us value the future, which triggers our desire to take these small, deliberate tweaks. Think about it, okay? So when you're feeling pride for something you have accomplished, for example, you put the immediate gratification off because of you value the future gain, that feels good. And you can think about that in so many situations. It's like, I have pride in myself, so I'm going to not do this immediate gratification because I want to do the big goal in my life. And that feels good, and that tells your body it feels good. So then your brain starts regurgitating how that feels good, and over time, that immediate gratification of that bad behavior lessens, and that immediate gratification, that's just a bad rut in your neurobiology, because you're changing that regurgitation. You've begun to lead your brain with these good emotions. So from varied research, feeling pride or compassion has been shown to increase perseverance on difficult tasks by over 30%. Got a bad habit you want to break? You want some perseverance? How about taking some pride, or some compassion, and focusing on that. Gratitude and compassion have been tied to better academic performance, a greater willingness to exercise and eat healthy, and lower levels of consumerism, impulsivity, and tobacco and alcohol use. Think about this. This is science. But doesn't this make sense? Yet this is how God created our brains. If using willpower causes stress and misery and self-hatred, then using these good emotions actually heals. More science. Using these good emotions slows your heart rate, lowers your blood pressure, and reduces feelings of anxiety and depression. And of course, this is daily creating new neuropathways in your beautiful plastic brain. So let me segue here a bit and talk about pride or self-esteem, or what I call vanity. If you're in my church, you'll hear me say sometimes, have a little vanity, make that good decision because you're worth it, okay? This is what I mean by that. Self-esteem simply means you think your ideas, feelings, and opinions have worth. If you have a high self-esteem, the positive thoughts about yourself outweigh the negative, and the negative doesn't make you discount your worth as a person. I want to repeat that one. If you have high self-esteem, the positive thoughts about yourself outweigh the negative, and the negative doesn't make you discount your worth as a person. High self-esteem also helps you understand that everything isn't about you, enabling you to not take everything personally and not be overly reactive. Is that you some days? Strong self-respect lets you see beyond yourself and feel confident of your place in the world. And according to the American Psychological Association, having high self-esteem is key to positive mental health and well-being. High self-esteem matters because it helps you develop coping skills, handle adversity, and put the negative into perspective. I want to read that again too. Helps you develop coping skills, handle adversity, and puts the negative into perspective. I mean, life is hard enough, right? And I know sometimes as Christians, we view pride, and I'm going to say that's the hubris, but we view pride or having some vanity in ourselves, this high self-esteem, as being wrong. And yet, the science says this is what's going to make us a better Christian. So this is your first question of the night. I hope you got people around you. Hope you gathered your roommates or your small group or your family. This is your first question of the night. You can pause this and ask each other this. How is having high self-esteem part of living your life in the way of Jesus? High self-esteem is part of following Jesus. How does it work like that? Talk about that. I'll be right here for you. Welcome back. I hope you had a great conversation about that question, because this could change your faith life. I mean, all of a sudden this becomes attainable and doable, and you can lead your brain and break some of these bad habits, and you can enter into this way of Jesus because it works. This is the way it works. Again, this is the way God designed our brain, and science is backing this up. This is the way it works. So yet another thing is that relationships with friends, people maybe you just had that conversation with, who encourage you and support you also is another big support through this. Friends who will tell you that the sacrifice now, putting off the immediate gratification, will have greater value with the future outcome. We all need these faithful and these rah-rah friends in our life to say, you can change, you can do this. This is your end goal. You can make this immediate decision. You can change your brain. You can lead your brain. We need these rah-rah friends in our life, right? We need those friends who are also making that brave decision to brave decision to brave decision. And to have these sorts of people in your life, you will need to show them love, compassion, and gratitude. That's more of these moral traits we talked about earlier, more of those little virtues we talked about, which underlies that these moral traits is the ability to put something or someone else ahead of your own immediate desires and interests, that we have chosen self-control to bless the other. Right? This is good. Meanwhile, we're changing our beautiful plastic brains. Now, haven't we just gone full circle? That if we are living out these moral traits or these little virtues or this way of Jesus, we may actually find these kind of friends that we need that will cheer us on. Full circle. God has given us the ability to rewire our brains, and it involves moral traits such as pride in ourselves, high self-esteem, compassion, kindness, generosity, and gratitude. And these are the very things that make the whole world a better place. The very things that Jesus modeled. Do you see the whole larger story here? Doesn't this make sense overall? One more thing to blow your mind. We have trees in our brain. Now, if you're a part of this church, or you see it on a YouTube channel, we have this whole series about trees. Trees are a big deal in this church because trees are a big deal in the Bible. So you might want to reference that, but we constantly talk about trees and how God has used trees. And once again, I learned that we have trees in our brain. This is according to Science Daily, what they wrote. A healthy brain cell indeed looks like a tree with a full canopy. There's a trunk, which is the cell's nucleus. There's a root system embodied in a single axon, and there are branches called dendrites. Neurons in your brain pass signals from one to another like they're playing an elaborate lightning-quick game of telephone, using axons as transmitters and dendrites as the receivers. Those signals originate in the brain and are passed throughout the body, culminating in simple actions such as wiggling a toe, to more complex instructions such as following through on a thought. Just as you can judge a healthy tree by its canopy, so too can scientists judge a healthy neuron by its dendritic branches. Trees in our brains. You can visualize that, but it's also like how science sees it. So I have this meme here. I'm going to put it on the screen now. And this is what that science is teaching us. Look at it closely. Now this meme, look at it. It makes sense, right? You think those things and your leaves grow thick. You think these negative thoughts and your leaves shrivel up. It makes sense, but yet it also is how our brains work scientifically, how God has made our brains. Now you think this would be some like do-gooder positive thinking meme, but it actually is a good visual for how God has made us. This is how we bring change into our lives. We are thinking about those growth things, living out those little virtues in ordinary time. This change in our lives is the way of Jesus. You're more than what your brain believes. You're a soul designed by God. Part of that design is the neuroplasticity of your brain, which can change your habits and how you think. You are growing better trees. Can you see that now? And this is also living in tree time. This is something else we talk about a lot in our church, because trees are always growing. We just don't always see them growing, but because how God made trees and God teaches us through trees so many times, we're always growing in tree time. This is where growth is always happening. It is in those small, deliberate tweaks that as I choose to give God more credibility than anyone else. And then one day, I'm a 10-foot tall, strong oak. Do you see how growth happens? So in closing, I just want to read Philippians 3:13-17. No, dear brothers and sisters, I have not achieved it, but I focus on this one thing, Forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead, I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Christ Jesus, is calling us. Let all who are spiritually mature agree on these things. If you disagree on some point, I believe God will make it plain to you, but we must hold on to the progress we have already made. Dear brothers and sisters, pattern your lives after mine and learn from those who follow our example. I see the ability to lead our brains in there. I see the desire to overcome the instant gratification for the long-term goals in there. And I see our need to be with other brave people as we lead our brains. And then one day, you too will be that 10-foot tall, strong oak with big, living, active trees in your brain. And you're going to be surrounded by circles of good people in your life. And you will be living this way of Jesus without shame. We get to lead our brains, guys. I'll see you again.